Here's our standard. Here's the way things should be built. We need to bring this up to that standard. Now we're coming to the backyard and rotted wood, okay, means non-original wood, means that it was probably added later, okay? I'm looking at this going, these windows are 100 years old. Are these windows gonna last 100 years? No. Always. You always have hardwoods in an old house, pre-1940. Hey guys, I'm Brent Hull. Welcome to episode 1 of the Old House Handbook, a new series we're starting looking at historic houses. And the way we want to approach this is would I buy it? And then if I buy it, what would I do to it? The whole assumption, right, of why we're doing this is that old houses are worthwhile, they're important, they're beautiful, right? We're in a period revival neighborhood. There's a great period revival across the street. I'm just gonna say my bias, I think new houses are terrible. I don't think they're well built. I think everything since production builders got started, they're a mess. So there's a lot of McMansions. That word's coined after 1980s. Enough reasons why new houses aren't as good as old houses. So that's my bias. Because of that, I want people to be able to buy an historic house, buy a great house that's well designed with confidence. So I know buying an old house can be scary, right? It can be, oh my gosh, what am I getting into? I have been doing this for 30 years, right? I studied historic preservation in Boston and came back to Texas and started my company. I'm now working all over the country looking at historic houses, helping people redesign their houses. The fact is that some of those things that scare you about an historic house really aren't that scary. The value that you get, the beauty that you get, the style points that you get are worth more, okay? Because driving through an historic neighborhood like this, you're like, I love it here. It's so nostalgic. It's so wonderful. These houses are so well designed. It's beautiful. You don't really see that in new neighborhoods and with new houses. And the quality of materials that are being put into houses today is substandard, in my opinion. And houses are not built to last 100 years. This house behind me is 98 years old. Should we buy it? Should we sell it? I'm biased towards wanting to buy them because I think old houses are better, but we'll see. Okay, so what style is this house? This is a Mediterranean revival house. How do you know? The twisted column, the way that cut stone, the heavy texture on the plaster on the outside, this little arch here into the garden on this side, all speak to that styling, okay? I suspect this house originally had a barrel tile roof, okay? That barrel tile roof would have been orange or kind of in those reds and orange colors that would have really given this a distinctive Mediterranean look. At some point, I suspect, because that's a asphalt shingle up there, it's been changed, but we're looking at a Mediterranean revival house, okay? The scale of it, the parts and pieces of it, the plank style door, right, are all old world Mediterranean kind of things. Now remember, that in that period revival era, when you're looking at Tudors and Mediterranean and French style houses, there's going to be this mix of materials, one being kind of playing off the cottagey look of those houses, plank style door. Two, looking at the more manor type things of elevation and stuff like that. And so you'll see sometimes a blend of those materials, a blend of those things. And so this is not a pure Mediterranean house, but it harkens to that, okay? And that's what they did during the 1920s and 30s. They tipped their hand to and played with a lot of those details. So Mediterranean revival, stucco on the exterior, right? Heavy stucco, very important. That kind of cut stone, cast stone looking stuff, the spiral columns, the plank door, barrel tile roof. I think even the swoops under these little windows harkens to that kind of open balcony, open window kind of look. You drive up, Mediterranean revival, charming house. The scale of it's really nice. There's a number of things I see when I look at this and kind of go, like the shutters for one, right? The shutters are a bolt-on kind of shutter, which I don't like. Those shutters, if they closed, I don't think they fit that window, right? There's no hardware that is exposed there. In the Mediterranean style, shutters are obviously part of it, but when you have a triple window like this over on the left side, there's no reason shutters should be there. Maybe there's some kind of awning or something if they were really going to do that, but this isn't really appropriate for having shutters. They've done something to that plank door, that front door. They've got a big half moon circle cut into the top of it, And you'll notice that the radius going around that door is about 5 inches on the left side and about 10 inches at the top. Maybe they had that pre-cut window trying to figure out where it was going to go. Right, I might try to improve that door. And here's where you could play around with this thing. If I put an elevated panel door on there, like a stained grade Spanish or Mediterranean style door like that, that could kind of play around with this being a little bit more manor housey. The ironwork looks to be original. There's some nice details there. The downspouts, I think, have been changed, and the gutter system has been changed. Even though I think it comes down in the right spot, that kind of fluting on that gutter and the riveting that you see there would have been something that would have been added later. The typical 1920s gutter was a square gutter with kind of like a couple little fluted indents on the outside, just a little bit different. Here's Brent being a geek about perfection as far as preservation goes, but they're all small little things that I think help the house, make the house look better. Maybe if they did end up changing that roof, we would know that those gutters were changed at the same time. These are pretty minor things. Like if I'm going to buy this thing, these are not things that I sit there and go, oh my gosh, right? I've got to completely change. No, we're talking about removing shutters or making the shutters more operable. We're talking about, changing a front door. The barrel tile roof could be a cost, right? That could be something that would be significant. At the same time, I think that is so important as far as the character and look of the house and making it look like it should have looked. I would budget dollars for a barrel tile roof. So we'll have to see how big it is and everything else, but those are the kind of things I'm looking at as far as whether I'd buy it. Let's go around the back because I think I saw something funky back there. Okay, so we're walking around the left side of this thing. Really charming little pass-through that comes through in here. This is an addition. I bet $1,000 without even having looked at it. One, we got a new window connecting there, but look what's happened to the stucco there. We've got a break at the top. Makes me think that this was an addition. Probably didn't have the foundation that this piece did. This is original, this isn't. This little kick out, I don't think is original. It's not original windows for sure, but not sure exactly what was going on there. But we've got an addition here, and those cracks in there, are they something that would keep me from buying it? No, but I know that that's there. This speaks to maybe substandard construction, maybe on the additions. I don't see any cracks on this part of the house, and so, or I didn't see any on the front either. So it makes me think that this house is pretty sturdy. This addition, maybe not so much. I suspect, okay, and this is, in historic houses, especially in the 20s, they oftentimes built the walls with a structural clay tile because fireproof was a big problem back then. So they would have may have actually built this thing with the foundation and no even stud walls, just a concrete block. That's why that stucco is sticking so well on there, okay? Let's just say this was built in the 80s or 70s or something like that. The construction methods would have been different. It may be why it's cracking. They would have had a stud wall, they would have had some kind of membrane on top, and then they would have put the stucco right to the wood framing, which may be why that's cracking. Is this a major deal? No, because what I would do is I'd probably cut out the stucco in this area, figure out whether I've got foundation issues, but it could be coming unstuck just because it's been stuck on wood framing. I'm not saying I would go back with a concrete block or something. Probably the way I'd approach that is I'd say, look, I just have to do another 20-year fix on this. My 20-year fix would be putting a better subsurface on the framing and then hanging the stucco on top of that framing. I don't think I could have a 100-year fix, but without a huge cost, I can fix that stucco without too much trouble. Yeah, it makes me think that this was a detached garage because I see this construction, flat roof, non-original windows, and I see this, and all of a sudden I go, oh, that's an older window. What's going on here? Oh, this was probably the detached garage. This was a connection piece that was built in between it. We'll have to see what that room is, but I can see that it's got a flat roof because of that hole in the scupper that comes out the side there. So maybe this is the original detached garage because in the 20s, garages were detached and so they weren't connected. This is connected, so that's probably an addition that was put on at that point. If that is the original garage, a 3-car garage would have been massive, right? And so that's interesting. Maybe it was a 2-car garage and it got added to. We'd have to look and see. You know what? Makes me think that it was an original 3-car garage. We'll have to see. Hopefully there's original plans or something. Now we're coming to the backyard, and uh-oh, I can see the original house right there, the back and the cornice of that house, and then I see a block there where the back side of that addition, and another block here. I've got a flat roof. Okay, there's two flat roof additions, not typical, okay, in the 20s, right? I'm not saying it never happened, but it's not typical. This addition too, I know it's an addition because it's got sliding doors, and anywhere I've got sliding doors, I'm immediately going, okay, sliding doors became popular in the 50s and 60s, and so, you know, these don't look like aluminum ones. These look like they're a little bit later, so 70s, 80s, something like that. We've got these sliding doors in there. That weird little swoop thing, they tried to match the swoop that's in the front of the house, but they've got this wart sitting on the outside of their addition there. Then I can see rotted wood on it, and look what I'm doing. Rotted wood, okay, means non-original wood, means that it was probably added later, okay? And then I look at the sliding doors, not even an invention in 1926 as far as an exterior door like this. And so I know that those are additions. So I'm looking at the original back of the house there, and I'm seeing two additions here, and you know, this probably a family room, because 1926 houses didn't have an informal living area. Now I'm looking at the back side of the garage, so I'm like, okay, so there was your detached garage, there was your main house. They've added these things on at some point, and the way these arches are done, and the way they're not even centered with the doors, all looks like a new mess that we've got to clean up. So look what's happening with this concrete. I've got concrete that's falling down here, that's lifting up there. I've got concrete. Look at where it was, you know, glued right there, and that's falling and breaking away. This whole thing is just this roly-poly kind of break up here. I'm seeing lifts. I mean, I'd break my toe if I hit that thing, and so another one over there. So I'm looking at this going, you know, this to me is a regrade, it's a fix. The exposed concrete looks like an 80s pool, right? Pool deck, and so I've got to change that. So one, I really liked this area. I think it's private and I think it's pretty. And if we could fix the back of this thing, I've got to redo the deck here. There's some money here. I mean, there's 10,000 plus kind of concrete grading that's got to be done. I've got to fix the doors. I've got to fix these arches. There's a lot of work back here. Now, how important is that? Well, you've got an informal living area. I'm looking at the back of it, and that's what I suspect it is. There's something the family could really hang out in there and have a lot of fun in there. Either this was done just poorly, or let's just say it was done in the 70s. It's 50 years old. Give it a break. Maybe it's just time to fix it up. If you wanted to Band-Aid it, I suspect you could come in and, you know, jack up this thing and level it out. That's a Band-Aid, right? You're going to spend $2,000 to $5,000, you know, jacking it up with a company that comes in and sprays foam under things to lift them up. It's a Band-Aid, but you know, options there as far as how you would do that. And as I look at this back area, I'm changing a lot of the materials here too. I'm not going back with sliding doors on a house from the 1920s. I'm going back with fixed doors. This is the opportunity in here is really cool because it could be a fun little private courtyard that would be fun. So I like this, right? I like this space. I just have to fix the parts and pieces of it. But this is probably, from what we've seen, the most money is going to be spent back here trying to fix this area. And what I'm going to be trying to do is trying to get it to the same quality level beauty that's up front back here, because I'm standing back here, and if I hadn't seen the front, I'm somewhere else. I'm in a 70s condo, and I'm not in a 1926 period revival neighborhood anymore. So we want to bring that back to this area and elevate it to what's going on up front. And we're seeing a common theme here, right? That the additions and repairs that have been done later are starting to show their age, okay? Which again, to my point, 1920s houses and older houses tend to be built better than new things, and we're kind of seeing that where, you know, this part's, let's just say 40, 50 years old, and it's showing a lot of wear and tear. You know, I can tell that I'm back in the front of the house. I've got these pretty little niches over top of these windows that look really nice. I see that I've got original windows. And then I go to the back and look what's happening right there at the top. I've got a flat roof that's rotting, okay? And I've got a crack down the seam of the stucco, okay? What I suspect is that that's the original part of the house, okay? And then they've made those additions later, which jives with what I saw on the other side. Just compare the windows. I've got a double hung window right here with, what is that? 1, 2, 6. So that's 18 over 18. 18 over 18 window. And then I've got a 1 over a half. That's really annoying to me. But what we can do is when we're looking at this, I would fix this so that it didn't look like a 60s, 70s remodel. Here's our standard. Here's the way things should be built. And then we need to bring this up to that standard. But you're seeing again, where those additions have happened, the quality just isn't there, and we've got an opportunity. Other thing is this could be a fun little courtyard. This could be a fun little side courtyard that right now it's kind of lost, right? It's just a bunch of different things, but we've got opportunity here to really do something cool. One of the reasons I love old windows is because they introduce a story, a narrative. They are the eyes of the house, okay? And it's so important that standing from the front of the house, you look, sit at it, and you like it, but you don't necessarily go, oh, those windows are great, okay? But when you come around here and look at the comparison between a new window and an old window, you go, those windows are great, right? Because those have a scale, a proportion. That old single pane glass, you can criticize it all you want, but there's a depth to it and a scale to it that's beautiful. And so there is a character that's being communicated in these windows, that this is 90s condo, okay? And this is historic house, charm, value, it's worth more. And if I took out all those old windows and went back with something like that, it would ruin this house. In historic houses, the windows are the eyes of the house. You do that and you're poking the eyes out. Here's what happens is a flipper comes along, looks at this and goes, I'm gonna be so much more efficient if I put in an insulated glass window. One, the math, he'll never get that money back, okay? He'll never get the return on the investment, and if he's flipping it, he doesn't care, right? But the new homeowner gets an uglier house, and that money, $30,000 spent, will never show up in the energy bills. So it's a waste, and it drives me crazy. These windows are 100 years old. Are these windows gonna last 100 years? No. As far as overall on this thing, I don't have major concerns. I see the rotted wood, but I expect that it's new wood, right? And so there's got to be some repairs on that addition and that scope, and trying to figure out how that comes together. But I look at this as an opportunity. There is cost, okay, and there is cost to try to bring it up to the level of the rest of the property. But I've kind of come up with my judgment on this house is that there's these additions that weren't properly executed, and there's an opportunity here that the square footage those additions have bought, right? The additions have gained an informal living room, which could be a very expensive space. I can now remodel, have that great space, and make it tied into the old house, probably for cheaper than I could if I wanted to, build it new. Okay, so now let's go inside and check it out. I mean, just standing on the outside, I see, look at the quality of this ironwork. And when I say quality, it's typical from the 1920s, but there's good architectural details, a good cap, the way that these pieces are welded together. It's very typical to have a square baluster and then a twisted one, and I draw that quite a bit. It's very typical in the 20s, but compared to new architectural ironwork that's done today, which is oftentimes made in China kind of materials, that stuff from the 20s is better. It is better crafted. I look at problems like this where the stone this needs some mortar. I don't think that's a big deal. In fact, I look at this bluestone and go, maybe that's the material I put on the back porch instead of that concrete. That would certainly elevate that concrete better. I'm curious if this is the original porch. I suspect it's not. I don't see a lot of bluestone being used in the 20s, but in Chicago maybe it was very common. In Texas it wasn't. I look at this and I think this is nice material, probably originally concrete. They put this over top of it, but it may be a material that we want to consider in the back. Here's that door I was telling you about, and I just see cracks in the concrete like this, where this has been come together, and that doesn't really cause me a lot of concern. I'm curious, they put a texture over top of this thing. I'm curious if that's original. It'd be fun to, and this is where I would try to find original pictures and things, try to figure out how this was put together and what exactly that looked like. But this is a cleanup, repair, caulking, new mortar, not a big deal as far as cost at all. This door is interesting to me. This is where I was talking about that they've got this reveal over here that's about 3.5 inches and up here about 6.5. Looks goofy. This door did not originally have this window in it. And so I suspect they wanted light into their entry. There's other ways, better ways to do that than this. Okay, so we're standing in the entry hall. Yeah, I'm just trying to get my lay of the land. I immediately know that doorknob's not original, right? So the hardware makes me kind of question. That looks like a 80s thing, but I do see the original ball finial on the hinges, which was very typical that time. It's interesting, a two-panel door. Two-panel door is very popular in the Greek Revival era. So to see it here makes me kind of go, that's interesting. They are 1.75 inch interior doors, very nice. I look at the stairs and I go, that looks like a Colonial Revival stair. Now, it isn't uncommon that in the Period Revival era, they would mix and match those materials because the millwork catalogs often showed products like this. They didn't show ironwork, which we saw out there. Ironwork would probably be the most appropriate stair for a Mediterranean Revival house. And so I would think about changing the stair, especially if I could come up with a fun design here. I need a better door, okay? There's something that doesn't have this goofy thing, wagon wheel sitting there. With that arch right there, maybe make these arches too. Now I'm starting to feel more Mediterranean Revival. That's what I'm looking at here. They've done something interesting here. They've got this textured pattern under here and on the ceiling. I don't know whether that was a fix of trying to cover up cracks or something in the ceiling, but that's not original. This floor too is not original. I know because of the way they've kicked it up here. They've laid this over top of the original floors, which I'm not sure what they are, but that's kind of curious to me why they did that. I do, now that we're in here, we can look at these original windows, and they've got chains, which is awesome. Chains were not as common as ropes. It speaks to me that they were actually spending good money on this thing. I've got 1.75 inch sash, very thick sash, deep profile here. And architects today will oftentimes look at, and the reason they love our 100-year window is because of this very thing. That deep profile gives them the shadow lines that you can't get with new windows. This could be elevated with millwork. This could be elevated with paneling on the wall, and not paneling like wood paneling, but paneling where they applied a molding over top of the plaster, which was common in that period. Obviously a new kitchen, right? Not an historic kitchen. Because the dining room's right there, this was probably the kitchen. Now, what would have happened was you would have come from your garage into the back kitchen area. Maybe this was the landing porch thing and this was the kitchen. Oftentimes kitchens of this period had a little breakfast area before it went into the dining room. So they've expanded this at some point and made this kitchen bigger, much more practical. I'm always trying to find the balance when I'm looking at an historic house of making a modern area like a kitchen, because kitchens in the 20s were a servant's area. They were very functional, okay, versus a kitchen today which needs to be part of the house. And I know we've got that family room on the back side. I'm thinking, how do we tie those areas together? How do we, if my family's in there, watching the football game, is someone in here cooking dinner and can't hear the conversations? And like, I want to try to tie those together. So certainly playing around with this area and this kitchen is going to be some part of it. Now, that's a big cost, right? But I would consider that any old house needs to have an updated master suite, and they need to have an updated kitchen tying onto the family room. Those are the things that we fix the most on historic houses: the master suite, the kitchen, the informal living. So those are kind of typical expenses that I would be planning for a house like this. It's interesting because here now is that addition that we saw on the back side that connects the garage. So it's not a very sexy space, but it's a very practical space, and so I'm glad they have that square footage there. But I don't know whether I spend much money on that area as far as how to fix it up, because it's a functional space now, and it can still be a mud room, it still be a utility room, or whatever we want to use it for. We looked at the repair that needs to happen on the outside. There is some things that are going to need to happen there. This broke up. It'd be interesting to see the original floor plans and see what was happening here. This kind of groovy paneling is 70s to me. And so how do we tie this all together at the house? Maybe the kitchen comes this way, right? Because now we're getting closer to that back area. These moldings aren't original, right? The paneling on that wall, this stained grade molding up here, you know, they're just parts and pieces like that just don't make sense. When you look at moldings, especially this molding, that is about 1/4 inch on the reveal right there. Maybe this is 5/8 of an inch. All moldings from the 20s are typically based on a 3/4 inch, 1 inch stock that's been planed down. It isn't until after the World War II that you begin to see moldings that get smaller and smaller. And I just did a video on molding sizes and things like that. And one thing I've noticed about door casings in particular is pre-1940 door casings averaged 3, 4, almost 5 inches at times. After World War II and into the 60s and 70s, you think about the clamshell moldings, which this is almost a bad clamshell. You get into, you know, 1/2 inch moldings, 2 inches wide, 3 inches wide, very small moldings. They don't punctuate the opening. And so new moldings, I had a video called Don't Buy Moldings Designed After 1950. Because of this very problem, is that they're just ill-conceived. They don't do what moldings are supposed to do. They don't communicate very well. They don't punctuate an opening. They're just not as good. Here we are. Okay, so now we're in this informal living room. Got a sunken bar, which is crazy. We're already sunk off this thing. Look at this weird ceiling. You got a weird X pattern on your ceiling. There is no historic precedent for an X pattern, okay, in beams. They never would have built that way. It's an interesting design decision that, you know, a decorator or someone came up with. Oh, that would be fun. Now we're at the back side. We see those arches. And here's where the arches are funny to me. They don't line up with anything. They don't line up with these doors. And we've got different materials back here. We've got this latticed, Frenchy, carved panel in here, and back there that kind of scalloping. I don't even know what to do with this stuff, right? It's just a major disconnect as far as how am I supposed to relate this Mediterranean house, which is charming, and to this 70s new ranch house, right? And so it just doesn't make sense. And so there's a big disconnect going on that I'm trying to resolve in my head. And this is why we would start over back here, because it's a nice space, right? Functionally, with the fireplace and a bar and kind of this bigger headroom and stuff like that. It's nice. We want to tie it together functionally, and then architecturally we want to get it back to that feel. Now, how would you do that? Well, you might do it with an arch in here, some kind of arch that connects it back to those arches remind us of the Mediterranean. I might go arch doors here instead of doing sliding doors. I certainly wouldn't put sliding doors back there. I would probably try to orient those arches on the outside with the doors on the inside, right? You know, I hate can lights, and can light transformation and stuff is happening. Lights are getting smaller and smaller. Here is the reason people hate cans. You've got, in this room, there's probably 20 cans in this space, a 20 by 18 space. I mean, I'm not sure you could put more cans in even if you wanted to. So, you know, this is an old way of trying to light a space, and there's a bunch of better ways to doing that with lamps, with sconces, with hidden lights, with smaller lights. I think the other thing that's happening too is you're coming to carpet, right? That you've gone to a new space, because all historic houses, and I'll have people say to me from time to time, well, we've got a 1920s house, there's carpet on the floor, we're wondering if we have hardwoods. Always. You always have hardwoods in an old house, pre-1940. Post-1940, 50s, 60s, not so much, but pre-1940, everything is hardwood. So, yes, you have hardwood floors if you're going into your upstairs bedrooms in a 1920s house. In here, This to me, this carpet to me looks like also is one of those kind of clues that I'm in a new space, and I would probably go back with hardwoods in here as well. It's interesting, you're right, we were looking at that wood back there, and the same designer who did that must have done this. I'm looking at this original, it looks like cut stone fireplace, and that's a really typical period revival fireplace, and I can see where they've cut this in. They've put this surround over top of it. So I know that this is a 1970s, 1990s, somewhere in that time, they built this out. And so there you can see the original crown. They've got the same built out around this door. So those two things go away for me. Playing around with this crown, they dropped this ceiling the same as they did in those other spaces. I suspect there's cracked ceilings. So I'm trying to think, budget minded, I'm sitting there going, okay, that might be something I'm gonna try to repair. You can see that they've got air grills in it, and it may be when they cut in all these can lights, unfortunately, they cut a bunch of tracks in the ceiling and they're trying to cover those up. So for whatever reason, they've dropped the ceiling at least one level of sheetrock in order to hide something. We'd have to figure out what that is. But I'm fixing this mantle. Here too, I'm also thinking about panelizing this room with that applied molding because it was something that was done during that period revival era. I am trying to bring order to this room. I'm trying to elevate it architecturally by adding that paneling, maybe a wainscot, maybe something like that. If there's an arch there, it's possible there could be an arch here so that there's some balance in this room, line it up with the windows on either side. So I don't know, there's tons of potential. I think this house is a gem, right? And it can only get better. I got to run back to the office. I'm going to run the numbers, going to check out, kind of see what the math is, but I like what I see so far. The additions that I've done gain me the square footage that are typically a problem on old houses. The quality of the work is okay in that it's not falling apart. There are some cracks and wears and things like that. The materials, as far as windows and doors, I'm going to change out. But because I already have original windows and some original doors, I'm already liking that. So there's a lot of good things here, a lot of good things going on that make me think that this is a good buy potential. We'll run the numbers and check it out. So in part two, what we'll do is we'll do the math. I'll sketch up some ideas as far as design stuff, what I would do. That way I'll know how much it costs, right? Because I'll kind of sketch up some ideas and think about how I would fix things. And then by doing that, I'll go, okay, well, if I did it this way, I'd get this much cost. So we'll kind of dig into that next round of designing and pricing and then figuring out whether, we're going to buy the thing. And if I was going to buy it, how I'd fix it. So that's part two. Come join me.